Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. Today we're here to talk about the Beretta Model 7522. This is from the same series as the Model 70, but it has a 6-inch barrel and is 22 caliber. But unlike other Beretta Model 70 series that are in 22, it does not have an adjustable rear sight. The Beretta Model 70 series was introduced in 1958 and was made until 1985. And it was divided up into different models in a very confusing fashion because the Beretta Model 70 itself suffered evolution in its early years. The 70S combined features from different eras of the Model 70. And it's generally very confusing trying to nail down exactly what you have. Fortunately, Beretta wrote the model number on the side. But in Beretta fashion, doesn't necessarily mean what you would expect it to mean from the models and the model numbers and history and things like that. The Model 75, for example, retains the crossbolt safety that was abandoned relatively early on in the Model 70's history, as do some other later models of the 70 series. It's all very confusing. But this one says 75 right on the side, and we're going with that. And as I said, it combines features from some of the early guns with features from some of the later guns. It has, for example, the 9-round magazine of the 70S T series, but it has the safety of the early Model 70s. And it does have the slide release similar to the Beretta Model 1951 that was adopted at some point during Model 70 production. Before we get too much further into the weeds, I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon. This is very much a shoestring operation, and your contributions help more than you know. I'd also like to thank channel benefactors, those individuals and businesses who have contributed to the channel in innumerable ways and really helped make this work. Among them is the collector who is allowing me to present this gun, so thank you very much. As always, shout out to Rain City Shooting Center in Kent, Washington for providing material support to the channel, and generally being a nice bunch of guys. So the Model 75, in this particular iteration, as I mentioned, has the crossbolt safety of the older Model 70s, the slide release of the later Model 70s, and the 9-round magazine from the 70S T series. So it's quite a hodgepodge. It's sort of mix and match features for whatever worked or whatever was lying around Beretta at the time, I think. Now, the first Model 70s did not have an actual slide stop. Like the Model 35 and the Model 948, it locked back on the follower of the magazine. Initially, the Model 70 was available in 32 and 380 ACP, and the Model 70S introduced 22. And by the time we get to the Model 75, as I said, it's a mix of features. Now, it does have a magazine safety normally, except this one doesn't. I think Beretta delighted in confusing us. Now, all the other older Beretta 22s I have, even when the hammer mainspring has been replaced, suffered from light strikes with modern ammunition. In fact, in my older guns, my most reliable ammunition that was devoid of light strikes was some 60-year-old Sears brand ammunition, which I inherited a large quantity of from my late Uncle Jim. God rest his soul. So let's see how this one worked out at the range. So as you can see, things worked out very well at the range. I did have a little trouble in the lighting of the indoor range, picking up the partridge front sight, but that's not the gun's fault, and if it were my gun, I'd fix that with a spot of paint or nail polish. But it shot very well. There's no recoil, and it's just very pleasant, very nice gun to shoot, and the ergonomics are quite good. So I was overall quite satisfied with it, and it's very nice to shoot. Now, the Model 70, by the way, it will inevitably come up in the comments, has a somewhat storied history. In .32 caliber, it was used by a number of police agencies and some military. But most famously, the .22 caliber version was used by Mossad for anti-terrorist work, including one rather famous incident where a Mossad agent took out a hijacker on the plane. Now, the way they carried it was with the hammer down on an empty chamber, and as he entered the plane and spotted a hijacker, he drew the weapon, chambered around, and running towards the hijacker, he emptied the gun into his chest as he charged, and apparently got a pretty good group, and it was effective. I am not certain of the rationale for using a .22 for a use such as this, but they did it. And again, it was used by various police and military agencies in .32 and .380. So there's a lot of history there. So let's have a look at this one on the tabletop. Okay, as mentioned, the Model 75 has the 6-inch barrel, partridge-style front sight, and a non-adjustable rear sight, and was sometimes labeled as the plinker on the barrel. I am uncertain whether that was done for import to America or whether it's something Beretta did, but it does appear on a number of these guns. Now, changes from the original Model 70, as mentioned, are the M1951 style slide stop that locks open on the empty magazine instead of locking open on the follower of the magazine like the earliest guns. Also, the trigger guard has been slightly extended from the first versions of this gun, make it a little easier to access the trigger, especially when wearing gloves. This retains the old style magazine release, and you can see in the grip it is labeled the Jaguar, so it is firmly in the Cat series of guns. Now this has the crossbolt style safety. On a lot of other versions of this gun, by the time this one was made, a more traditional Beretta style thumb safety, as found on the 92, had been fitted, but this has the crossbolt. Now, the crossbolt is a somewhat controversial feature because depending on your grip, it can be easy to take off or apply when you don't mean to. Now, for my hand, this actually works pretty well, just like the 1951 Brigadier. I can pop the safety off with just the ball of my thumb very easily. Putting it back on requires shifting my grip. As mentioned, the slide does lock back on empty. And that worked quite well with all the ammunition I tried. Now, this has a bit of weirdness here. You can see the top strap is actually cut to remove the front sight to accommodate the longer barrel. I am not sure why that is. I haven't had this gun apart, and rather than risking YouTube's tender sensibilities, I'm not going to take it apart. But I suspect that the way the barrel removes with this sight out here required that there be a slot there to get the barrel out properly and easily. It takes down in Beretta fashion with a lever, which there's a divot in the slide there that allows you to rotate the lever, and then it all just slides off the front. And again, the slot is, I believe, so that you can remove the barrel in the conventional fashion. These are the standard plastic grips, which are kind of a brown plastic. They actually provide a good grip. Ergonomics are very nice. It's a very comfortable pistol. The trigger is nice and crisp. It's not super light, but it's not heavy. And it's just very, very nice to use, especially when shooting quickly. Really, really good. It was completely unobtrusive when I was shooting the gun, to the point where I didn't even think about the trigger till I got this to the tabletop. And as I say, there's kind of a bewildering variety of the Beretta cat guns based on the Model 70, and even more variety when you get into the Model 80 series, Model 81 series. But it's a beautifully finished gun, as you would expect for a Beretta of this period, with lovely deep bluing, no machine marks or anything. Just really, really a nice little gun. Oh, and the magazine, by the way, which I mentioned in the style of the 70S T series, has a 9-round magazine rather than the original 8-round magazine. And loading, it's very easy. You just push the first round in, and that moves this little pin or screw down far enough that you can grasp it to pull the follower down to load subsequent rounds. So loading the magazine is quite easy. Overall, it's a very easy gun to use, and it is surprisingly not hard to adapt to simply ejecting the magazine with your offhand. Now, of course, this is not a combat pistol, so it's not vital that you be able to remove and replace the magazine in a great big hurry. But it's really a beautiful little gun. And I've always found the aesthetics of the 70 series to just be really spot on. It's just such an elegant thing. One of the more conspicuous changes to the whole Model 70 series is that after 1968, they had a grip with a very prominent thumb rest or target grip to qualify them as a sporting firearm. And I find those kind of unsightly, and they don't really get in the way because of the way the controls are located, but I don't care for them. I like this older, purer grip quite a bit better. And as I say, the gun was really very, very reliable for a 22 semi-automatic. It did not suffer the noted Beretta foible with their older 22s that I've experienced with them, having less reliable ignition, even with a new hammer spring. And this is quite a gem, and the condition is fantastic. This could almost be a new gun. So I'm very pleased and delighted that I was allowed to present this. Oops. So thank you specifically to the collector that allowed me to do so. I very much enjoyed shooting it. So that's it for this time. I hope this finds you well. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you again real soon.